What are your memories of some of your early matches with the Macho Man Randy Savage, and what was it like working with Randy?
Uh, Randy he came in to New York. I don't know if you remember when he was by himself without
Right.
Elizabeth, and he hadn't really wrestled on top anywhere other than
Memphis.
Memphis. He wasn't a very knowledgeable wrestler as far as working, on top in any other territory. And I remember the first match that I wrestled with him in Detroit. He called the whole match, and after the match we didn't get much of a response, and I was the champion at the time. And I said, Randy, I said, I'll let you call the whole match because it's the way I work. I said, but I did stuff. Uh, I threw more drop kicks with you than I have, in one day that I've thrown in 2 years since I've been here. I said, we were just doing things for doing things. I said, I'm going to explain to you the style that New York likes. I said, New York likes a little bit of wrestling and some ass kicking, mixed in.
Right.
They don't want to see just bumps, It's, to me, that was a very jabroni match. Stuff that I was doing when I first started, going 20-minute draws. What you don't know what you're doing, and he picked it up pretty quick. I mean, he I don't know that I had anything to do with it, but he figured out what people in New York liked. And
I guess take us through a match with you and Randy if you were to put one together. Like, what would the flow be? Pretty much.
If he put the match together?
No, if you put the match together, what was the flow of the match? Like, how would it be?
Well, to me, no matter what you do, unless if you're involved in a serious angle, like where Greg, I had surgery because of Greg.
Right.
That gives me a reason to go in there and jump him. If you have a cold match, to me, it's still the basic
formula.
Very basic formula. The babyface goes out there and he out wrestles the heel. So it's up to the heel to make the babyface look good. So it's up to Randy to make me look good. And you do a few spots, and he's trying to get, no matter what he does, whether he gives me an elbow, try to stop me, picks me up, goes for an elbow, I move out of the way, get up, give him a couple of arm drags. No matter what he does, I'm still coming out on top. And he's trying to get out, and and I'm out wrestling him. I out wrestle him, and finally he has to do something heelish to stop me. And a lot of the heels don't understand, when you're going to stop a babyface, it's got to be illegal. And it's got to be behind the referee. The referee can't see what you do, because then the heat goes on the referee.
Right.
So, you have to stop a guy by doing it. A lot of heels would want to out wrestle me. And I said, I don't like that. I mean, I am built as a wrestler. How can I let you out wrestle me? Where's the heat going to be? You got to do something. You got to break the rules. Otherwise, there won't be any heat.
Right.
You break the rules, and the people get pissed off because you had to cheat to stop me. And that's how you get heat. And then, again, then it's up to me for him to be trying to beat me, and me, not dying, and, starting to come up. And finally, when you make a big comeback, I used to make comebacks, I think I was known for that. I'd make a comeback till I'd be exhausted.
Right.
And that's why people say, you have a lot of fire. But that's, I used to go and, I'd go and keep going and bump the heel around, because now when I make a comeback, now it's time for the heel to fly for you.
Right.
So, and then you do the ending, whatever the ending is.
Do you think more could have been done with that program? Because it was kind of short.
Yeah. They could have done, to me, they could have done a lot more with me than what they did.
Right.
And I would talk to Vince, in WrestleMania 20, I mentioned how I go in there and I talk to him, and, how Vince would make you feel good, and, you wouldn't accomplish anything. But, many times I'd be upset, and I didn't think that I was utilized to the best of my ability. I think I had a lot to offer, and for some reason I was held back. I think they could have done, I think I got over regardless. But I think they could have got a lot more out of me if they wanted to.
What are your memories of working with Andre in tag matches?
Andre was great. I mean, I was very lucky that he took a liking to me. I remember working against Randy Savage. He didn't like Randy Savage, and he didn't like John Studd. And I'd be, I was lucky that I was his partner.
Right.
I mean, he'd step on their feet, and they couldn't get away, and he'd chop them, and he'd pick them up by the hair, and if they didn't hang on to his arms, he'd pull the hair out. I mean, he didn't care. He didn't like either Savage or John Studd, and I mean, he was mean.
I think Bobby Heenan was telling us he did the same thing to Ultimate Warrior too. Yeah. How did Randy Savage change when he got the belt? And was he as paranoid as everybody says he was backstage with Liz?
Yeah, he was. He was. He was never comfortable when Liz was around. He was very protective of Liz. It's
a lot of people said he would lock her in closets and stuff like that. And
not in the closet, in the locker room.
Right, in the locker room.
He would make sure that nobody else went in. But being in the business, you couldn't. I know that I wouldn't trust my wife with the boys.
Right.
So I mean,
Right.
Did he have a reason to be overprotective? Maybe he did.
How hard was it to work with Jake Roberts around this period of time? Was he out of control, or was Jake still?
No, Jake. Jake. No matter what condition he was in, he could perform in the ring. It was amazing.
What about Roddy Piper? What were your thoughts of Mr. Piper?
I thought Roddy Piper was a little guy that wrestled like a big guy and knew the business and knew how to deal with a promoter more than anybody else. I thought for what he had to offer, body-wise, he got the most out of every ounce that he had. I mean, Roddy Piper, to me, was very, very impressive. A guy that could draw some money. I mean, knew the business. I never really knew of him backstabbing anybody. He always treated me good. He was a good man.
Do you consider him one of the best talkers in the business?
Without a doubt.
What was Jimmy Snuka like outside the ring?
Jimmy Snuka is, I never hung around Jimmy that much. We had a show about 2 months ago, and we went out to have dinner, and we ended up having a few beers together, and we laughed so much. I mean, he was making me laugh. He says, "Tito, I've never seen you laugh this much."
All right.
Again, I never hung around Jimmy that much. When I came into New York in 1983, Jimmy was over as big as anybody, anywhere. I mean, wherever we went, the place was sold out. Jimmy was making a ton of money. I know that whenever, we sat down to eat, he was another one of those guys that always picked up the tab. Jimmy was a good man. He's I think he's experiencing hard times right now. It's sad, but Jimmy should be set.
Right.
And he's not. And that's why a lot of the guys are bitter about the business because a lot of the guys feel that there shouldn't be anybody who was a professional wrestler that was making a lot of money without a pension and reaping rewards from what we did in the past. But if you didn't save your money, there's nothing to fall back on.
I guess when Jimmy went through that ordeal with the Allentown hotel incident, what are your memories of that with the girl?
Well, that was my birthday when I first came in.
Oh, that was when that all happened?
Yeah, that was May the 10th.
Wow.
I went to bed. I woke up in the morning and I heard what had happened, and I was totally shocked because I knew the girl also.
Right.
And I don't think anybody really knows what happens there. What happened.
Do you think Vince covered it up, or?
I don't know. I mean, it could have been a total accident. It could have been an accident.
Right.
They just never shared. They never shared anything with them. It wasn't talked about.
Right.
Nobody talked about it. And if Jimmy's my friend, if he doesn't want to talk about it, I'm sure I'm not going to ask him.
Right.
I don't even know. I heard stories that it happened, in the car, and then I heard it happen in the hotel. I mean, so who's telling the truth?
Right.
So I don't want to say anything about that because I don't know.
Right.
I mean, I'd be lying to you.